Hi, I'm Julia. My father once handed me a drink and said, "You should smile more." That same night, I collapsed, while my stepmother whispered, "She's always been fragile." They thought it was over. But what they didn't know was who sat at the next table, watching, recording, remembering. And what came next. They never saw coming. I didn't want to be there. But guilt's a funny thing. It doesn't knock on your door, it camps out on your porch with folded arms until you give in. That's how I found myself sitting at a dimly lit table in a rustic little place my father insisted on, something special, he'd called it. The candles flickered too hard for my liking, like they were warning me to leave. But I stayed. Just like always. Dad, Harold, held court like he always did, smiling that practice smile, waving at the waiter like an old buddy, acting like this dinner was a celebration. But it wasn't. It never was. It was a check-in, a temperature read, a control session. I was the one being evaluated. Lane, my brother, barely looked up from his steak. He only nodded at me when I arrived. And Vanessa, perfect little Vanessa, hugged me like she hadn't just ignored my texts for weeks. "It's been too long, Jules," she chirped. "Yeah, I bet." The clink of cutlery scraped my nerves raw. The small talk was a battlefield, every sentence a trap. I smiled through it, lips tight. This was me keeping the peace. Then Harold waved down the waiter. "We'll start with a bottle of the house white," he said, eyes flicking to me. "My daughter loves it." "I'll pass, actually," I said. He chuckled, "Come on, honey. One glass won't kill you." The waiter nodded before I could protest again. That was Harold, deciding for everyone, smiling while he did it. The wine came. Cold, clear, familiar. But I didn't order it. I stared at the glass. It sat there like a dare. Harold raised his and took a sip. "To Julia," he said. Finally settling down, finding her way. I forced a smile, lifted mine, and took a small sip. It tasted off. Just faintly. Metallic. I glanced at Harold, who watched me a beat too long. My stomach twisted. He knew. He always knew. Knew about the antidepressants, the rule never to mix. I told him once, quietly, during one of those forced Sunday lunches. And now here we were. The warmth crept in slow. My neck flushed. My pulse ticked up. I set the glass down. Didn't touch it again. Conversations blurred. Vanessa was saying something about yoga retreats. Lane barked a laugh at his own joke. No one noticed. No one cared except me. I looked around the table and it was like watching a play I didn't audition for. They weren't talking to me, they were talking around me. Like I was a guest in my own family. And Harold? He was thriving. His tone never changed, but I caught the rhythm. The way he framed things. "Julia's always been sensitive. She's learning how to manage herself now. Therapy's been good for her." It wasn't support. It was a narrative. He was writing me small, manageable. I remembered things. Times he adjusted my dosages, "Just helping," he said. "Doctors don't know you like I do." I remember the way he complimented my outfits, right after asking if I thought I'd gained weight. Then I saw Vanessa lean over, whisper something to Lane. They both looked at me. Their faces didn't move, but their eyes, sharp, alert. I wasn't being welcomed back. I was being watched. My hand found the wine glass again, fingers tracing its edge. Not drinking. Just thinking. That's when I saw him. Across the room, sitting alone at a corner table, Marcus. From my old job. We hadn't spoken since I left, after that mess. The mess Harold helped stir. He looked older, but the eyes were the same, kind, alert. And they were locked on me. Had he seen? The switch? The hesitation? My breath caught. Did Harold know Marcus would be here? Was this a coincidence or a setup? Marcus looked concerned. He leaned slightly forward, as if trying to read my face. I turned back, face blank. The panic curled low in my belly. Then Harold stood again, glass in hand. "To my daughter," he said. Finally learning her place. I froze. My hand trembled, but I didn't drink. Instead, I made a choice. When Harold leaned in to whisper something to Vanessa, I quietly swapped our glasses. Just a test. He lifted the one I'd touched, drank without pause. Nothing happened. But something shifted. He blinked longer. Rubbed his temple. Or was I imagining that? I looked at Marcus. He shook his head slowly, warning, Or just confusion? I didn't wait to find out. I smiled at the table. "Excuse me," I said, standing. "Think the wine's not agreeing with me." Vanessa frowned, but no one objected. "Not really." I wrapped the napkin around the glass and slipped it into my purse. Outside, the air hit cold. Sharp. Real. I turned, just once. Through the window, I saw Harold, face redder than before, gripping the table's edge. His smile gone. He thought he was controlling the story. He never even knew who was sitting just one table away. The light crept in slow. Not harsh. Not warm. Just there, gray, still, like it didn't want to disturb me but couldn't ignore me either. My head throbbed. Not from alcohol, I hadn't even finished that glass. But it felt like I'd been hit with something heavier than wine. Something that settled behind my eyes, pulling at the corners of my memory. I sat up, blanket tangled around my legs. The bedroom was quiet, too quiet. Not peaceful. Hollow. I glanced at the chair in the corner, my purse was still slumped there. Half open. I reached for it. Wrapped in the same linen napkin, the wine glass was still inside. I stared at it for a long while. Not moving. Not thinking. Just staring. Did I make it all up? The question wasn't new. It lived under my skin, had for years. But then my phone buzzed. One message from Harold. "Sleep well? Next time, try to stay through dessert." That did it. Any second guessing snapped like a twig. He wasn't hiding it. He was mocking me. He always wrapped his control in jokes and fake warmth. That text wasn't casual. It was a reminder, he still saw everything. Still expected me to play along. I carried the glass to the window and held it up. The sun hadn't fully broken through, but enough light hit the rim. That's when I saw it, an odd, oily streak near the base. Not lipstick. Not wine. I touched it with a tissue. Sniffed. Chemical. Sharp. Not right. Suddenly, I was back in college. Night after night, too tired to think, too calm to care. Later, I found out, Harold had been slipping something into my tea just to help you rest, sweetie. He'd called it love. He called everything love. I sealed the glass in a sandwich bag. Placed it in a plastic container I usually used for leftovers. Not exactly for in 6th grade, but it was something. If I'm going to be gaslit, I said to myself, I'll bring the fire this time. I hadn't even put the container down when my phone rang again. Unknown number. I paused, debating whether to answer. Curiosity won. Julia? The voice was cautious but familiar. Marcus? Yeah. I saw you leave last night. You okay? I could have lied. Should've, maybe. But there was something in his voice, real concern. Not polished. Not careful. Just honest. I'm fine, I said. You didn't look fine. Silence stretched. I saw something weird, he continued. Before dinner. Your daddy switched glasses with you. Thought it was strange at the time. My heart sank. So it wasn't in my head, I said quietly. No. I don't think it was. He offered to meet for coffee. I said yes before my brain could catch up. I didn't trust easily. But this wasn't about trust. It was about not drowning alone. By early afternoon, I'd half convinced myself to stay calm. To not spiral. To wait for the coffee meet up and not jump to conclusions. Then came the knock at the door. Vanessa. No warning. Just appeared with a fake smile and a tray of store-bought muffins. Thought I'd check in on you, she said. I stepped aside, let her in. She sat like she owned the room, looked around like she was taking inventory. I talked to Dad, she started. He said you got upset last night. Had a bit of a panic thing. I didn't respond. Just watched her. He said you stormed out. Still silent. I mean I get it, she added. Dinner was a lot. You've always been a little sensitive. There it was. The rewrite. The version they rehearsed when I wasn't around. I smiled, tight. Said nothing. Inside, I was burning. They'd done this before. Twisted my reactions. Turned reality into performance. I used to argue back. Now I listened. Cataloged. They've rehearsed this script before, I thought. I just never noticed I was always the villain. She left with another fake hug. I let the door click behind her without a word. That night, I sat by the window. Notebook in lap. I replayed the dinner like a film. Every look. Every word. Every flick of Harold's hand. The glass. The oily residue. His toast. Marcus's glance. The aftertaste. I wrote it all down. For the first time, writing didn't feel like processing. It felt like taking control. When you stop explaining yourself, you start reclaiming yourself, I scribbled at the top of the page. Then, just before midnight, my phone lit up. Unknown number again. I answered. A man's voice, distorted, low. You should stop digging, Julia. Some things are better left buried. Click. No name. No context. Just that. I stood in the dark for a long time. Not afraid. Not really. Just sure. Sure that this wasn't about a dinner anymore. Or a drink. This was war. That night, I thought my father's poison was in the glass. I didn't know it had already seeped into everyone around me. The kitchen clock ticked too loudly. Every second sounded like it was counting me down. I sat at the table, staring at the wine glass sealed in plastic, wrapped in the napkin I'd stolen from that restaurant. I hadn't moved it since. It sat there like evidence and accusation all at once. Part of me wanted to take it straight to the police. The other part, the well-trained, obedient one, told me not to make a scene. Don't ruin the family name. Don't cause trouble. That voice was my father's, living rent-free in my head. I ran a finger across the counter. Cold. Empty. The axe forgets, I whispered, but the tree remembers. My grandmother used to say that after my grandfather hit her. I didn't understand it back then. I do now. I pulled out the old journals from the bottom of my closet, dog-eared, warped from humidity. I flipped through pages of self-doubt, half-finished apologies, and notes that didn't make sense until now. Then one line caught my eye. Dad gave me chamomile tea. Said it would help me stay calm before our talk. That talk happened 5 years ago. I remembered waking up hours later on the couch, groggy and confused. I told myself it was exhaustion. But now, no. The pattern was there. Quiet, deliberate, hidden behind care. I pressed the book shut and closed my eyes. My father's love always came with a leash. The next memory came uninvited. The lake house. 5 years ago, they threw a party for my parents' anniversary. It was a perfect southern evening, string lights, grilled steak, laughter that didn't reach the eyes. I remembered holding a glass of water, trying to smile for photos. Vanessa kept pushing the dessert toward me, her hand resting on my shoulder, gentle but firm. Dad had this made special, she said. Don't be rude. Halfway through dinner, the world went fuzzy. My body felt heavy, slow. Faces blurred, voices echoed. I remembered Harold leaning toward Vanessa, whispering something. Her laugh was soft, rehearsed. I woke the next morning in my old bedroom at their house, wearing pajamas I didn't remember putting on. Everyone said I'd had too much wine. But I never touched the wine that night. Only water. I grabbed my phone. My cousin Tyler had taken pictures that evening, he always did. I texted him, "Hey, do you still have those photos from the lake house anniversary? The one 5 years ago?" He didn't reply right away, but I kept my phone nearby. My pulse wouldn't slow. By mid-morning, I drove into town, parked outside a small independent pharmacy, and walked in. My voice trembled at first. "Can I ask you something off the record?" The pharmacist, a man in his 60s with steady hands, nodded. "Go ahead." "I think someone put something in my drink." I showed him the photo of the residue from the glass. "Could it leave that kind of film?" He adjusted his glasses. "Depends. Some sedatives or antihistamines do that. Crushed up, they dissolve in wine or tea. You wouldn't taste much. Might make you dizzy, groggy." My throat tightened. "Could it be tested?" "Not here," he said gently. "But you can send it to a private lab. You'll need a sample in a sealed container. Don't tell anyone until you have the results." I nodded. "Thank you." As I walked out, the air felt heavier but my mind sharper. I'd spent years afraid of my family's truth. Now I wanted to dissect it. When I got home, my phone buzzed. Marcus. He'd sent a photo, grainy but clear enough. A waiter at the restaurant, handing Harold a second wine glass. The timestamp matched the moment I'd arrived that night. Marcus texted, "That wasn't the first time I saw something off with your family." I called him immediately. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "There was a party, years ago. Your dad accused you of being too emotional. Said you couldn't handle responsibility. I remember because everyone laughed, but you didn't. I saw your face." It stung. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I'd believed him back then. Believed I was too emotional. Too dramatic. He'd been setting the narrative for years, carefully, consistently. By the time I realized it, no one believed me anymore. That night, I didn't cry. I planned. I opened my laptop, created a hidden folder titled "In Case I Disappear." I started recording everything: audio notes, photos, timestamps. My voice sounded calm, clinical. Like someone documenting evidence, not emotion. Then I ordered a prepaid phone. One my family couldn't trace. Later, I reached out to Emma, an old college friend who worked for a small law firm. I didn't tell her everything. Just enough for her to say, "Be smart. Stay quiet. Gather proof before you confront anyone." Her tone wasn't fear, it was warning. Before midnight, an email came in. Tyler had finally written back. "Found some old pictures. Sending them now." I clicked the first one. The family around the dinner table, smiling like a magazine ad. My eyes scanned every face until I found mine, slumped, dazed, barely upright. Then I saw Vanessa. Sitting beside me. Smiling. Holding my fork. My stomach dropped. I zoomed in. The angle, the hand, the frozen second, it said everything. All this time, I thought I was clumsy with my memory. Turns out, I was just surrounded by skilled editors. I walked up the front steps of my childhood home under the guise of helping clear Dad's study. The real reason was harder. I needed to be there, in the place that held my past like a mausoleum. The hallway greeted me first, rows of framed faces: Dad, Mom, Lane, Vanessa. Where used to be my picture, baby of the house, there was a blank space. The air inside felt dense, as if the long hidden corridors remembered my absence more sharply than anyone. Vanessa met me at the door, smiling as though nothing had ever cracked. Lane glanced once, eyes glazed, then returned to his phone. I said hello, tried to sound casual. Vanessa placed a wine glass on his side table with a faint smirk. It took my breath. The glass felt familiar, not the cheap sort, but one I'd seen at the restaurant, the one I didn't touch. I caught Penny on the staircase. She stood still, face calm but eyes calculating. I stood there, clutching the box of old files Dad asked me to shred, feeling anything but safe. The living room sun came in full, and Penny invited me over to catch up. Her tone sounded sweet, but the words felt sharp. She leaned in and said, "Everyone here has had to learn their limits, Juliana." She used my full name. That nickname I hadn't heard in years. The meaning landed. She was in on this, all of it. Because she knew things. I realized that as I glanced at the wall, saw photos of the lake house party, the one where I blacked out. She laughed a little when I mentioned the wine glass. "You sure it wasn't just stress, darling?" she asked, a teaser hidden in softness. My heart raced. This wasn't about helping me. This was about watching me. Judges waiting for a verdict. I breathed slowly, steadying myself. These people had trained their eyes on me for years. Today I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't going to sit quietly in this house. Later I slipped into Dad's study while everyone watched football in the den. The door was slightly ajar. I nudged it open, stepped inside. The smell of old paper and cologne, Dad's cologne, hit me. On the desk, under his nameplate, sat a new file, Legacy, 2026 Projections. I looked at the screen. My name, missing. My title, Consultant. Lane and Vanessa listed as equal heirs. I felt the blood drain from my face. I remembered the old saying, "Give a dog a bad name and hang him." He'd framed me. Again. This wasn't accident. This was design. I snapped photos of every page with my phone. My hand shook. The hallway portraits felt alive now. They weren't just watching me, they were part of the play. I left the study without a word and shut the door softly. In my car I sat for a long moment, engine off. The sun had shifted. Shadows moved across the dashboard. I closed my eyes and inhaled. I thought, trust, but verify. I uploaded the WAL images to a secure cloud folder. Then sent a message to Marcus, "We need to talk, now." While the world thinks I'm bending, no, I'm strategizing. I wrote demands, acknowledgement of the drink, explanation of the will, public correction. I didn't ask for love. I demanded respect. Quietly, calmly. It was late when I walked back inside and found my phone vibrating. A voice message from Vanessa: "Dad's upset you broke into his filing cabinet. He wants to meet tomorrow, office 9 a.m." I stared into the hallway mirror and saw myself. For the first time, I didn't look like the daughter afraid to be seen. I looked like the one who would not disappear. Tomorrow I'll walk into his world, but this time I hold the flashlight. The moment I walked through the door of my townhouse that evening, my eyes fell on a sealed wine glass and napkin sitting exactly where I'd left them, centered on the kitchen island like they were waiting to be believed. I hadn't touched them in days. I'd thought maybe I needed space to think, but what I needed was a reason to act. That night, I found it. I opened my laptop, pulled up Harold's firm's contact portal, and started typing, "I'm requesting a private meeting regarding legal estate concerns." I didn't wait for a reply. I suggested a time, 48 hours from now. I would force them to sit with what they'd avoided. I recalled something a mentor once told me: "You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate." That night, I gathered my pieces: the copied will, Marcus's screenshot, even the photograph from the lake house. Then I added the glass and napkin into a padded box labeled "Private, Chain of Custody." I wasn't waiting for an invitation. I was building my terms. The next morning, just as I was locking my front door, I saw it. A plain brown envelope wedged beneath the welcome mat. No return address, no markings. I brought it inside and sliced it open carefully. Inside was a USB stick, red-capped and worn. Written in block letters across white tape: "Look before you speak." I hesitated, but only a second. I plugged it into the side of my laptop and opened the files. Receipts, bank documents, memos from the family's firm. One wire transfer stood out immediately: $38,200, marked as a consultant retainer. The recipient? Melissa Sinclair. That wasn't just a name. That was Vanessa's alias. One she used in college when she'd rent cars under the radar or book hotel rooms Dad never needed to know about. My fingers hovered above the trackpad. I exhaled, copied everything into my secure cloud folder, and sent a new message: "We need to meet. I have proof. No more delays." I didn't know who sent the USB, but I knew why they did. This wasn't about revenge, it was about showing them what I saw when they weren't looking. 2 days later, I walked into the glass conference room at Harold's law office. It was late afternoon, and the light from the windows gave everything a dull shine. Harold sat at the head of the table, Penny beside him, her hands folded neatly. I brought only a small bag and my evidence folder. "I came here for one thing," I said, without sitting. "Transparency." I placed the USB on the table. Harold's expression flickered, just for a second. Penny didn't blink. "Where did you get this?" he asked. I looked him straight in the eye. "Does it matter? The question is why it exists. And when you knew." Silence followed, thick, unsettled. Penny reached for a nearby pitcher and poured Harold a glass of water, sliding it toward him with that same subtle care I remembered from childhood dinners. I didn't touch the offered glass beside me. "I'll stay sober. I'll stay aware," I said quietly. Then I laid out my terms, steady and calm. I wanted acknowledgement of the wine glass incident. Access to the original will. A formal correction filed with the estate. And a joint press release, not a whisper campaign, not a leak. Public. On record. Harold opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the door opened behind me. It was Lucy. Her eyes met mine, then shifted to Harold. "I have something to say," she said, barely above a whisper. No one told her to leave. She walked to the table and placed her hand flat on it. "I've stayed silent for years," she said. "Harold and we altered records. We moved money. We made things disappear to protect the firm's image." She turned toward me. "Melissa Sinclair was never a real consultant. It was Vanessa. And he knew it." Harold froze. Penny's face, for the first time, cracked open with something close to fear. "Lucy didn't stop. I preserved your legacy. But I won't watch you bury her to keep it intact." I sat back in my chair. For the first time, I didn't have to convince anyone of anything. The room already knew. Their silence said it louder than words ever could. When I left the building that evening, Lucy followed me out. We didn't speak until we reached the parking lot. "I'm sorry it took me this long," she said. I nodded. Let's make it count now. I called Marcus as I drove home. We're ready, I told him. He knew what that meant. We wouldn't rush it. We'd do it right. That night, from the upstairs window of my townhouse, I watched the sun set over the Savannah River. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt familiar. Quiet isn't always peaceful. Sometimes, it's strategy. Around midnight, I heard a car slow outside. I peeked through the curtain. At the edge of my driveway stood three shadows, Harold, Penny, Lane. They were talking fast, glancing up toward my house. Something had shifted. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus: "True story, you're about to be headline." I stared at the screen, then back to the street. They tried to edit the narrative for decades. I'm about to publish the director's cut. I woke to a strange calm. The kind you feel just before everything changes. I sat at the edge of my bed, listening to the hum of Savannah outside my window, cars, a distant siren, the river breeze slipping through the screen. But inside my townhouse, the air felt thick. News of my family's board meeting had spread. I'd done nothing yet, still, the world seemed to shift around me. Dad hadn't called. That silence rattled louder than any apology. I dressed carefully, blouse crisp, blazer on, hair pulled back. Power is posture before its presence, I told myself quietly. Then I met Marcus at the cafe near the square. He handed me a strong coffee and slid me a drive. "When you're ready," he said. I nodded. I was past survival. I was making a move. After coffee, I left the cafe and the sky had turned overcast with threat. Two uniformed officers approached suddenly, polite, professional. "Miss Cole, we need you to come with us regarding a property trespass complaint." My pulse jumped. At the station I saw the photo, me entering Dad's office with Lucy. The complaint claimed I stole confidential materials. They cited Vanessa's report. My racing heart steadied. I handed over my phone, opened my email where Dad's office had invited me earlier. I showed logs. The officer frowned. "You were authorized," he murmured. I left the station with the same calm I'd brought in. This wasn't proof I was innocent. It was proof they were afraid. Back at home, Marcus texted, "Check your drive." Something big. I opened the folder. Offshore transfers. Trust funds. Beverage supply companies tied to Dad's empire. One entry noted consulting, beverage supply, and the name matched the wineglass company from the restaurant. My lips went dry. He watched me change. "They'll hit harder now. Stay safe." I pulled in a slow breath. Memory, motive, and the missing piece had aligned. Dad didn't slip the drink because he hated me. He slipped it because it reminded everyone which seat I held. He bought compliance. I realized the game: control, quiet, obedience. And I was done. My phone rang. It was Dad. His voice steady, but cold. "Julia, you're making this worse than it has to be. Walk away, and we'll fix this quietly." I looked at the ceiling light. I replied evenly, "You taught me to fix things quietly. I'm teaching myself to fix them correctly." He exhaled. "You're being used." I paused. Then I'm in good company. I thought of Lucy, Marcus, us. He threatened defamation lawsuits. I recorded everything. His hang-up clicked like the final piece of a puzzle falling. For the first time I felt his fear, and I didn't flinch. That evening I gathered Lucy and Marcus in my living room. We sat surrounded by printouts, screenshots, voice memos. Lucy pulled out a board member contact. Marcus outlined a press timeline. I quoted Eleanor Roosevelt, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." I looked at my hands. I was tired of being quiet, invisible, safe. But tonight I felt alive. Calm, ready, in control. Around midnight I heard my phone ping. An anonymous email: "You missed one recording." Attached, Dad's voice from the restaurant: "She'll drink it if I pour it myself." My chest tightened. I played the clip twice. Then I whispered, "So that's what truth sounds like." He taught me silence. Now I'll teach him echo. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop wide open, the folder labeled Evidence USB glowing in the screen's pale light. My pulse was steady, but inside everything felt electric. The threat had already landed, the voice recording, the legal warnings, but tonight I refused to shrink. I called Marcus and Lucy, voices low but urgent. "It's time to mobilize," I said. Lucy said we needed 3 independent witnesses, people outside the family, to confirm the drink tampering. Marcus lined up a live webcast for later. We would go public. I leaned back and whispered to myself, in a room where people unanimously maintain a conspiracy of silence, one word of truth sounds like a pistol shot. It hung in the air as I watched the clock tick forward. I wasn't just prepping, I was shifting the momentum. Fear didn't vanish. But it became purpose. At 6 p.m., the webcast began. I adjusted my mic, checked the lighting, and took a breath. My name is Julia Cole. What you're about to hear is not revenge, it's truth. Lucy introduced our first witness, Penny's college classmate who remembered seeing Penny hand a drink to Vanessa at the lake house party. The witness provided date and location. A hush flickered across the chat window. I played the audio clip of my father's voice from the restaurant, calm, patronizing, "She'll drink it if I pour it myself." The chat exploded with "she deserved to know" and "stop the cover-up." Then Dad popped up on a video call, face tight, silent, angry. He didn't offer defense. He just watched. And that's when I realized, it wasn't enough for me to be right. I had to be visible. The public pressure grew loud. The tension shifted. The story stopped being mine, it started belonging to everyone watching. Within hours, my phone erupted. An anonymous email zipped across major news desks. Financial documents, board meeting minutes, internal emails between Dad and Vanessa. Marcus later called, "I worked with a whistleblower inside the board." I stared at the Dropbox link. His company's stock dropped. Board members pulled back. Within minutes, Penny called, "What do you want?" I replied calmly, "Justice. Exposure. Change." She tried to intimidate. I recorded the call. My heart surged, not with fear, but something sharper. Triumph edged in. I wasn't certain of victory, but I knew the narrative had gaps now, and I held the pen. Late that night, Lucy, Marcus and I huddled in my living room. The windows faced the Savannah skyline, lights dwindling. We drafted a public letter, to the board, to the family, to anyone who thinks I was silent by choice. I watched Lucy type, Marcus pull graphics, me editing tone. I said, "Sometimes waiting isn't weakness, it's preparation for the right moment." We planned legal back channels. Media strategy. A live-streamed Q&A where I'd sit with family and ask the questions everyone deserved to hear. We weren't just responding, we were shaping what came next. I checked my phone again. 10 minutes until the stream started. My father's name flashed on the tray, incoming conference call, Harold Cole and board. I leaned back in my chair. My reflection stared back, unchanged house, changed mission. I whispered, "They thought I was invisible. They didn't count on me bringing the camera." The drive to the Sinclair estate felt longer than usual. Every mile brought back a memory I tried to bury, dinners at that long mahogany table, my father's voice echoing over polite laughter, the way my name was always an afterthought. When I pulled into the driveway, the mansion looked smaller than I remembered but somehow heavier. The marble plaques glowed under the headlights, Sinclair and Company. My phone buzzed non-stop. Notifications, comments, hashtags. The live stream link had already gone viral before I stepped out of the car. Inside, the air smelled of waxed wood and expensive wine. Portraits lined the foyer, Harold, Vanessa, Lane, all painted in oil and arrogance. The frame where my photo once hung was still missing. I stood under it for a moment, then whispered, "You taught me to bow before you. Now I'm standing up." Lucy stood near the camera setup in the main hall, checking cables. Lights flashed against the marble floor. A moderator's voice echoed from the far side, "We begin when Ms. Marlowe speaks." I took my place at the center of the room. It wasn't just a broadcast, it was a reckoning. I faced the crowd, microphone in hand. For 30 years, I began, I was the daughter who smiled. I smiled through dinners, through gossip, through silence. Until I learned those smiles were transactions. Behind me, the footage rolled, family gatherings, boardroom photos, all pristine, then flipped to bank records and wire transfers under fake consultant names. The audience fell still. My father rose abruptly, face flushed. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. I lifted my hand, steady. "You'll finish your sentence, after I finish mine." The room erupted in quiet gasps. Vanessa fidgeted, eyes darting to Penny, who gripped her glass too tight. "This isn't about bitterness," I said evenly. "It's about truth." Rosa Parks once said she had no intention of giving up what was hers. Neither do I. The footage changed again. The receipts, the offshore accounts, the restaurant camera stills. The perfect mask of our family began to crumble in real time. People watching online flooded the chat with "she deserved to know" and "stop the cover-up." Harold sat back down, jaw tight. For the first time, his silence didn't command the room, mine did. Then I placed something on the table in front of me, the cracked glass with my name scratched off the base. "Does anyone recognize this?" I asked, holding it up so the camera caught every detail. No one spoke. This was my place at the table. "You erased it when you erased me." A ripple went through the audience. I set the glass down gently in front of me and continued, "When you erase someone's name, you erase their future. Tonight, I take mine back." The comment feed exploded, "Invisible no more. Julia wins. Truth over legacy." I walked the length of the hall, stopping by the empty portrait frame. The space stared back at me, hollow and accusing. Returning to the table, I sat down, at the head seat, where my father had always sat, and placed the glass before me. He didn't move. No one did. For a heartbeat, everything froze, the lights, the air, the history between us. Then the moderator ended the stream, and just like that, the noise of the world faded into an uneasy quiet. When the guests began to leave, I stayed seated. Lucy came beside me, her steps soft against the marble. "You did what I couldn't," she said quietly. I nodded. "This victory isn't clean," I replied. "It's jagged. Like the glass I held." She left me alone in the hall. I opened my phone, typed quick messages to Marcus, press follow-ups, legal filings, the safety deposit location. 11:47 p.m. The house was finally silent except for the faint hum of Savannah outside. My phone buzzed again, another alert. Breaking news: Sinclair Corporation shares plunge after scandal leak. I stood, unfastened my blazer, and slipped off the heels that had carried me through the storm. The chandeliers above still glimmered faintly. I looked around the hall one last time and said, almost to myself, "This night, they lost the table." But I found mine. Morning came softer than I expected. Not with a jolt or a rush of adrenaline, but a steady brightness that slipped through the blinds and landed on my skin like quiet reassurance. For the first time in what felt like years, I'd slept without waking in the middle of the night. No pacing, no scrolling, no mental courtroom debates. Just sleep. I made coffee without checking the news. Stepped out onto my little balcony with a chipped iron railing and watched Savannah stir slowly awake. A jogger with a golden retriever passed by. Someone honked twice at the corner bakery. The world didn't collapse because I told the truth. It turned anyway. I took a sip, letting the steam warm my face. I used to think silence kept me safe. Now I know, silence is just another kind of decision. This morning, I chose voice. The messages had flooded in overnight. Not just support, but recognition. Strangers saying, "You told my story too." And some even apologies. Small, clumsy, overdue, but real. A neighbor across the street waved up at me. I waved back without thinking. Funny how simple gestures can carry the weight of rejoining something bigger. For years, I walked this street like a ghost. This morning, I felt present. There was a knock. Not loud, just familiar. Marcus stood there, a bag of warm bagels in one hand and that lopsided smile of his that said, "We made it, but let's not get too comfortable." I opened the door and gestured him in. We didn't say much at first, just sat across from each other at my little table, steam rising between us. He finally broke the silence. "Sinclair and Company board's in emergency session. Harold hasn't made a statement. Vanessa stepped down this morning. Penny's gone dark." I nodded. I never wanted to destroy them. I just wanted them honest. He handed me a folder. Legal paperwork, formal submission of evidence, ongoing investigations. Clean lines, proper channels. "You sure you don't want to take this further?" he asked. "This was never about revenge," I said. "I just needed to make it stop. For me, for anyone else stuck in that kind of house." Marcus leaned back. "You know you could write this down. Not a blog post. A book." Or a film? Let people see what legacy silence really costs. I didn't answer right away. Just looked out the window. The mail slot clicked. He went to grab it. An envelope, worn at the corners, addressed in my mother's handwriting. It was postmarked the night of the live stream. I opened it slowly. Her words weren't polished. They weren't absolving. But they were hers. "I didn't know how to be brave," she wrote. "Maybe you did it for both of us." I sat still for a long time. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't deny what happened. She admitted fear. And somehow that was enough for now. I folded the letter and placed it in the wooden box labeled Roots. It wasn't a clean ending. But it was an honest one. "Not all seeds become flowers," I whispered. "But I'll keep the soil just in case." Later that afternoon, Marcus and I spread papers across the living room floor. Whiteboards. Diagrams. Funding leads. I sketched out a nonprofit, support for survivors dealing with family power and wealth trauma. A place to talk, to be heard, to rebuild. I called Lucy. She agreed to help shape the educational side. And I made one more decision: I wouldn't sue the company. I'd give the evidence, let justice work, but I wouldn't feed another media firestorm. "This can't be about punishment anymore," I told Marcus. "It has to be about healing." He smiled. "Not every storm leaves ruin," he said. I finished it. "Some leave room to rebuild." We talked about lectures, college panels, community conversations. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting, I was creating. That evening, I walked down to the riverbank alone. The same spot where my father used to take me fishing when I was a kid. Back when I still tried to earn his quiet approval. I held a smooth stone in my palm, one I'd carried for weeks. On it, etched faintly, "I am seen." I tossed it into the water. "This isn't where my story ends," I whispered. "It's where I stopped whispering." The ripples moved outward, soft but certain. I turned back, shoes in hand, gravel underfoot. The sun was higher now. The wind carried warmth. And I knew one thing with clarity: the table I found was never theirs. It was always mine to build.